Okay, so ready to dive into a story about, like extending human life. But, and I'm not talking just like boring life extension tips or anything. This is about the philosophical dilemmas of like, what if you outlived everyone you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a concept that's, humans have been thinking about this for forever, basically. But what if we go beyond just the idea of, okay, we're going to live longer? What happens when we get into like the nitty-gritty emotional turmoil that would come with that,
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at the man who stopped aging.
Yeah.
It's about this guy, William.
Uh-huh.
And he basically undergoes this treatment that kind of like presses pause on his aging.
Interesting.
And, I think as someone who, you love learning new things, you're always diving deep into new ideas, I think this is going to be right up your alley.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. The story really dives into the kind of the human element of all of this, right? So we see that William, his motivation for doing this, it isn't just about like, oh, I want to live longer. It's very much tied to relationships and kind of the impact that outliving people has on him.
Right.
Really dives into that.
Yeah, because it's like you can't really separate those two things.
Right.
And it's not all like, like doom and gloom science and existential dread.
Right.
Yeah, the author actually uses some like pretty interesting metaphors to get these ideas across. Like there's one that compares life to a tango.
To a tango?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
well, because
it makes you kind of think about. Like...
It does. Yeah, the passion, the steps, the kind of back and forth, and bittersweet kind of ending.
Yeah.
It really does. And it highlights that kind of that balance that he has to strike between, holding on to these memories. Right.
But also embracing new experiences.
Right. Because if you're going to live that long,
right,
you can't just be stuck in the past, right?
Exactly.
And then, as if just grappling with extended life isn't enough, it takes like a whole other turn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're talking like digital consciousness.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is getting interesting.
Yeah, he undergoes this process called like neural digitization.
Okay.
And it brings up all these questions about like, what even makes us who we are?
Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah.
Philosophers have been debating forever. I mean, could a copy of you ever really be you?
Right.
What defines you?
Is it your memories? Is it like
your soul?
Your soul.
Yeah.
And then throughout all of this, you have this like, theme that keeps coming back up about quality over quantity.
Okay.
It's not just about racking up, how many years you can.
Yeah. Live, but it's what are you doing at that time?
Right.
And we see William, he finds meaning in reading. He loves spending time with his loved ones.
Yeah.
He even uses technology to like kind of streamline his life a little bit.
That's smart.
Make things easier.
If you've got the time, might as well. Yeah.
Yeah. There's even he connects with this book called The Empty Room. Have you ever heard of that?
Empty Room. I haven't. What's that about?
It's interesting because like it's all about kind of like connecting with these stories.
No, I see where you're going.
Yeah. Finding those reflections in stories.
Okay. So he finds kind of...
And speaking of connection,
it's
not just romantic relationships that this book dives into.
Okay.
It's like it really emphasizes how important honesty is.
Right.
Being consistent.
Yeah.
Being open with the people in your life, whether that's your friends, your family, even like people you work with.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a good life lesson in general.
I'm going to say that applies even if you're not going to live for 500 years. Those are good.
Exactly. And, the book doesn't shy away from, even if you have extended life, you still have to deal with death. And we see him, he's with Lena, and they're dealing with her terminal illness.
Oh, wow.
And they do it with such like...
How do they cope with that?
It's like this like honesty, but also they find humor in it.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So they kind of find a way to...
Yeah, like they'll be like joking about the most like mundane things,
Like the contrast.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And it makes you think, how would I even deal with that,
Yeah.
And then we find out that he's working on this big project, right? This idea that he could leave behind like this digital legacy of his consciousness. Can you imagine?
It's like, what does that even mean?
Like leaving behind more than just your photos and your writings and whatever.
What would people even do with that?
But like a part of you is still here.
Would they be able to, like, interact with it? Or would it just be like,
I don't know. It's wild, right? And it makes you think, like, how would that...
Yeah.
What kind of impact would that have on the world, you know?
Yeah.
On the future? Crazy.
It's really interesting, right? You have this guy who's trying to make sense of this, like, crazy situation.
Yeah, and he goes about it in such an interesting way. It's not just one thing. It's like he's trying all these different things, which actually, when you think about it, makes a lot of sense. Like, on the one hand, he finds a lot of comfort in reading, you know?
Right.
Especially philosophy. I bet you can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Spending hours with those books, just kind of...
Trying to find those answers?
Yeah, exactly. Trying to see if anyone else has figured it all out, right?
Right.
But then at the same time, he's also, like, diving headfirst into all the latest tech. Like, he's got these AI assistants. He's all about it.
Yeah, which is interesting because you wouldn't think that those two things would necessarily go together.
Right.
You know, philosophy and AI.
You'd think they'd be at odds, right?
Yeah.
But he's proving that wrong. It's like
he's taking a little bit of both.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm going to use all the tools I have, right?
And speaking of tools.
Okay.
We can't forget about this whole digital consciousness thing, right?
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
It's mind-blowing when you really think about it.
Yeah.
They talk about mapping his entire connectome.
Wow.
Every single neural pathway, synapse.
Like a blueprint of your brain.
Yeah, and then they take that and put it into a computer.
That is wild. And it makes you wonder, like...
Is that even possible? And if it is, what does that even mean?
Right. Like, is that a copy of you or is that actually you?
Yeah, it's like, does that digital version of you have the same rights as you?
And responsibilities.
Yeah.
It's huge. And these aren't just hypothetical questions anymore. I mean, this technology is getting closer all the time.
So it's like, we need to be ready for it.
Exactly. We need to figure out the answers before we get there. And it's not just the technical side of it either, right? There's the emotional aspect too. Like William, he lives for a really long time.
Right.
And he sees a lot of people he loves pass away.
Yeah, there's that scene where he's walking through the park and it's like,
you remember that.
He sees the families, the kids playing.
Yeah.
And he just feels so alone.
Yeah. Like he's on the outside looking in.
Exactly.
Like no matter how long you live, you can't escape that.
Right. Death is the one constant. But he does find ways to cope.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so there's hope.
Yeah. He connects with people. He reads. He spends time in nature.
Those are all good things.
Yeah. Like he finds those little moments of joy, even though he knows that everything is temporary.
Right. Because even though he's got all this time, it doesn't mean it's easy.
No. Not at all.
Huh.
But he keeps going. He doesn't let it stop him.
That's good. He keeps trying new things, right?
Yeah, he travels. He learns new languages. He even starts writing himself.
So it's like he's saying, even though I've lived this long life, there's still so much more I want to do.
Exactly. And that's inspiring, isn't it?
It is. It's like, it makes you think, am I making the most of my time? You know?
It really makes you think about what's important. Like, what kind of impact do you want to have?
And it's not always about, like, changing the world, you know?
Yeah.
It can be about the little things, the connections you make.
Like William in his books.
Exactly. He finds so much meaning in those books.
He does. And then there's that whole thing at the end about him wanting to leave behind a digital version of himself.
Oh, yeah. That was wild. Like, imagine that.
The crazy, right?
A part of you that lives on even after you're gone.
But is it really you?
Right. That's the big question, isn't it?
It's like we're on the verge of something huge, and we don't even know what it means yet.
And the man who stopped aging, it doesn't give us all the answers, but it definitely makes us think.
It does. It makes you think about what it means to be human, what it means to live, to die, to love.
Big questions.
Big questions. You know, it's really something how they take this whole idea of living longer and make it feel so real.
Right. It's not just some sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah.
It's about real stuff, you know, like love and loss, finding your place.
Exactly.
It's like we're all William in a way, just on a different time scale.
Yeah, and speaking of, I mean, the relationships in this book,
oh man,
they're intense.
Yeah, talk about a roller coaster, right?
He goes through so much, like the joy of connecting with someone.
Yeah, and then outliving them.
Over and over.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, how would you even process that much grief?
I don't know, and it's not just like romantic relationships either.
Right, he's got kids, friends.
Yeah, even coworkers.
And they change, you know?
Yeah, the world changes around him.
And he has to adapt.
It makes you wonder, like, what would it even be like to have a conversation with someone who lived hundreds of years ago.
I know, right? Their whole perspective on things would be so different.
It makes you think about how much we're shaped by our time period.
Totally. And William, he's living through all of it.
He's got a front row seat to history.
And it makes you think, like, how would you handle that? Would you even want to live that long if it meant seeing everyone you care about pass on?
That's a tough one.
Right. It's like this whole other level of existential crisis.
But he manages, he finds ways to cope.
Yeah, he does. He finds joy in the little things.
Like reading, being in nature.
Those quiet moments.
Yeah, those are important.
And storytelling, too. Did you notice how much emphasis there is on stories?
Oh, yeah. He loves his books.
He does. And it's not just reading. He starts writing, too.
It's like he's trying to make sense of it all.
Maybe that's how he copes, turning his experiences into something meaningful.
And sharing them with others.
Exactly. It's like this book we're talking about. It's a story, but it's also making us think about these big questions, just like William with his writing.
And it stays with you, even after you finish it.
It does, and that's the power of a good story, right?
It makes you think, makes you feel.
And this one, it really makes you appreciate the time we have, however long or short it may be.
Yeah, it's like it's not about the quantity, it's about what you do with it.
Exactly. And William, he really takes that to heart.
Yeah, he's not just sitting around waiting to die. He's out there living.
Trying new things, connecting with people.
Leaving his mark.
Which brings us to that whole digital consciousness thing, right?
Oh, yeah. What a way to end things.
I know. It's like he wants to leave a piece of himself behind, but on this whole other level.
It's mind-blowing, really.
It makes you wonder, what would it even be like to interact with a digital consciousness?
Would it really be him?
Right. Or just a copy. And even if it was a perfect copy, would it still have his essence, his soul?
I don't know. But it's definitely something to think about.
It is. And I think that's what The Man Who Stopped Aging does so well. It makes us question. It makes us feel.
It reminds us that even with all our technological advances, there are still some things we just don't have answers to.
Exactly, and maybe that's okay.
Maybe that's what makes life so interesting.
It's the mystery, the unknown. And The Man Who Stopped Aging, it reminds us to embrace that, to keep searching, to keep living, even when things get tough.
It's a good reminder.
It is. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed exploring these ideas with us.
And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to go out and create your own legacy, one story at a time.
Until next time.